Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Vladimir Putin sneezes. The world is catching cold. Struggling COVID economies. How are they going to take this as fuel prices begin to skyrocket? Shall Ghana survive this? The e-levy drama continues in Parliament, and it appears very obviously to be damaging Ghana's Parliament that has had some good name for a while now, with potential MP casualties. 15 sitting days. Who has missed and who will lose their seat as a result? UTAG, are the lecturers really back to the classroom without getting a dime, a peswa in their pocket in the pay rise fight? So what was all the point about the days and weeks of strike? We'll tell you how the lecturers are voting across their various campuses, rejecting the decision of the National Executive Council of UTAG to suspend the strike. What will be the way forward? I'm Samson Ladia Nyenini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. Welcome. And here is Samson's take. Corruption. What a sick country that is Ghana. It is solely in a sick country where grand corruption is normalized that people caught stealing are free to walk the streets and possibly dissipate the stolen money or conceal it over a year after they were caught. In August 2019, a journalist, not the police, national security, BNI, now NIB or IOCO, equipped and paid by the state, caught a big thief. The Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, SHRAJ, and the Office of Special Prosecutor, OSP, quickly started a probe on the back of Manasseh Azore Awene's contract for sale investigative piece aired on JoyNews. SHRAJ issued a report on the 27th of October 2020, finding him guilty of the corrupt conduct of winning huge government contracts with his 3-year-old company and subsidiaries and selling those contracts. The president, who had suspended Ejenim Boateng Ejie, Chief Executive Officer of the Public Procurement Authority, PPA, from office, sacked him. The man charged with protecting the public purse, whose bank account held only about 40,000 Ghana cedis. Note that, only about 40,000 Ghana cedis at the time of his appointment, now had in excess of 40 million Ghana cedis. Less than 3 years in office. These accounts were frozen by the former Special Prosecutor, Martin Amidu, but it appears they have not remained frozen all this while. That the system has remained dead slow against him. And it is because our congested prisons, where inmates feed on less than 2 cedis a day, are homes for the poor, who steal just a bunch of plantain to survive. The big thieves are never candidates here. On 4th October 2019, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, GII, also filed a complaint for a more comprehensive probe. This time, the former PPA boss, the board of directors, and 2 officers of his Corrupt Talent Discovery Limited came under the floodlight. SHRAJ gave its decision on 11th February 2022, a few weeks after the High Court, presided over by Justice Elfreda Amy Denchi, dismissed ABA Ajay's certiorari application challenging the earlier decision, claiming SHRAJ breached the rule of natural justice or fairness because he was not allowed to cross-examine some witnesses. He also claimed that there was no complainant when the complaints had in fact been filed by the president. In its latest 162-page report, Evacuation was able to explain the source of only 86,000, note that, only 86,000 of the more than 5.6 million Ghana cedis in his cedi account with the UMB Bank. So, bank officials found nothing suspicious and never asked any questions about the lodgements, as they are required by law to report to the Financial Intelligence Center, FIC. Well, Shraj has ordered him to refund the unexplained amount to the state within 6 months. He has been handed a 10-year ban from holding public office. He's already serving a 5-year ban. The Constitution and law command people to declare their assets before assuming public office. But guess what? He and the chairman of the PPA board, Professor Douglas Boating, failed to do so. Professor Boating had a flimsy excuse. Like a number of public officers, he claimed he was in the process of declaring his assets. That's 3 years after taking the job. ABAJ has been ordered to declare his assets within 3 months. On 2 occasions, he improperly altered the decision of the board in favor of his rogue company TDL, and the board was indicted for failing to insist on compliance with conflict of law procedures and due process. Dr. Emmanuel Yawwachi, note this: the General Secretary of the Domikwabenya MP Adwoa Asafo Fathers Christo Asafo Church was the technical director at the Procurement Ministry. Adwoa Asafo was the procurement minister at the time, and her technical director was on the PPA board. She moved him from the church to the PPA. Dr. Boachi, who is involved in the Christo Asafo group of companies, was caught in the corrupt act of conflict of interest in not recusing himself when the board considered and approved a single source procurement of 160 Kantanka pickup vehicles by the Education Ministry in 2019. Do not be surprised by these thieving conducts in the Shraj report, because I am not. This is typically how corruption has been normalized in public office in Ghana. It is only in a sick country that people caught in such broad daylight graft and sleaze are allowed all the time to dissipate and conceal the stolen wealth. Candidates raise at least $100 million, convert that into cedis, to campaign to be president, and at least 400 million Ghana cedis to enter parliament. Appointees, party executives, and people connected to power become filthy rich overnight, and we see how they display their wealth in our faces. Government contracts are handed to party people who in turn sell these contracts to make at least 10% of the value. We know all this. It goes on every day. They take much of this money to the bank, and no suspicion is raised by bank officials. If a small fry left a small amount of dollars into their bank account, they will flag it and freeze it. We sure need a massive coup on corruption to stop this evil fleecing this country. And that's my take. We'll be right back.
Цим ранком ми захищаємо нашу державу наодинці. Як і вчора, найпотужніші сили світу спостерігають здалеку. Чи переконали Росію вчорашні санкції?
apart from the fact that a lot has been said, a lot of diplomatic moves have been made to stop the aggression. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked. So we're all waiting to see what will happen. And for us this morning, we're trying to figure out what to do with nationals who are resident in Ukraine. It's becoming quite difficult from where we sit to move them. So we need to ensure that they are safe and that they are keeping safe. So we're engaged very much on this.
The way the matters are escalating in Ukraine, if you pay regard to what America is saying and then what Putin himself is saying and the rest of the world, the safety of our people cannot be guaranteed. In these circumstances, I can only say that you don't have to play lottery with their lives, because we don't trust the next military maneuver that is going to come from the Russian leader. And our best bet is that it is good to be educated, but not to die prematurely or to be hurt prematurely. Let's bring them to the place of safety, and when our life returns to normalcy, they could always go back.
We are all stranded here. We don't even know what to do.
We are calling on the government today with all possible means, because we don't want to wait for things to get at hand when there wouldn't be any inbound and outbound flights to the government to help the student body, the Ghanaian body in Ukraine. With any means, the people here are really panicking.
One of our senior, he told us, he also told us that we should get our necessary documents with us, like our passport, our student card, and then water. They all keep on hitting on the same information, that we should keep those documents and money with us should in case of anything. Currently, I have 2 bottles of water and then 4 biscuits with me. I can't control my tears. I don't know what will happen, because yesterday we were there, we are not hearing anything, and then in the night, I don't know, because I was awake learning, I would also right from that 12 o'clock to right now, I've never put my head down.
Right. So as we speak, the Russian military is advancing into town, and people are distraught. They don't know what to do. They've been sleeping rough. Train stations are packed with people, and it's such a terrible sight to behold that this small country is being bullied in the manner that Russia is doing. But is there justification for it? Whatever the justification, what we want to concentrate a lot more on will be what the repercussions are for struggling covered economies in our part of the world, including Ghana. And you may have heard an MP suggest already that this is the reason the e-levy must pass. Let me introduce my guest and we get to these issues for you. Professor Kojo Appiagyei is of the School of Law, University of Ghana. Professor Kwesi Ening, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Gary Nima Kumafo is Member Legal and Constitutional Committee of the New Patriotic Party. Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa is the Honorable MP for North Tongue and Ranking Member, Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. Dr. Theo Echampong is Political Risk Analyst and Economist. Gentlemen, thank you also very much for joining us. And let me begin with you, Mr. Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa. I was surprised. Something strange really happened. It was strange to me. Yesterday on the morning show, they were speaking to student leaders who were trying to get their members, from harm's way, out of harm's way. And the question was put to one of the student leaders. Have they made contact with Ghanaian authorities? Are Ghanaian authorities in touch with them? And he answered, The loud affirmative, yes. And they say, who have you been dealing with? It says, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa.
Yeah, good morning, Samson. Good morning to the panel and to all our distinguished viewers and listeners across the globe. Yes, I've been in touch with the students, and as you do know, as a former student leader, I keep a close relationship with student leaders across the globe, particularly of the National Union of Ghana Students Fraternity. And with such a humanitarian crisis on our hands, we must first and foremost be concerned about our nationals. What is their condition? How can we whisk them out of safety? I must say that very few people in the international community thought that, you know, Vladimir Putin would go this far and descend that heavily on Ukraine. It is only now, yesterday in his speech, targeting the military in Ukraine, that he asked them to rise up against their own president, Volodymyr Zelensky.
It's been a long time of warning to the U.S. that this was possible.
Yes, I mean, there's some intelligence that indicated that, look, following what Putin had done in Crimea, when he invaded the Crimea Peninsula and totally, you know, took over Crimea, he is clearly pursuing an expansive, you know, foreign policy, you know, mindset. He still has, if you like, the romanticization of the Soviet Union, where the USSR was all and mighty, masters of all they could survey. He clearly wants to see if there is that possibility of, as it were, having another form of USSR, even though it remains a really, you know, outlandish dream that cannot be achieved. But we must put the current conflict in context, that it is clearly about the Russian geopolitical interests.
That's right.
They felt threatened by how Ukraine had become so pro-West, and they felt threatened by Ukraine's application to join NATO. Look, there are very few countries that will accept adversaries coming so close, using a neighboring country as, if you like, a launch pad. Let's remember that because of, you know, the Cold War, you know, era, you still have a lot of mistrust, a lot of bad blood. The Cold War may seem to be over, but it's still simmering. It never really went away totally. And so Russia had served notice many years ago, actually even during the 2014 invasion of Crimea, that they would not accept a situation where, you know, Ukraine is admitted into NATO, and where the Western allies like the United States, Germany, France, Britain, use Ukraine as a military base. And there is history of that.
That gives them 600 kilometers away from Moscow.
Absolutely, so close, so close. And you see, we must be guided by history. The Russians remember how, after the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 in Cuba, which was foiled by, I mean, that was the one led by Cuban dissidents in the United States of America. That was foiled. After that, the Cubans reached out to the Russians for help. So in 1962, the Russians established a military base, erected missiles in Cuba.
That's right.
The Americans said, hell no. We are not going to allow you to establish a base only 90 miles away from the United States of America. And that led to the what became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. There was then fear of the possibility of full blown out nuclear war. And eventually, the Russians had to leave Cuba. As we speak, Cuba continues to face sanctions from the United States of America because of what happened in 1962. So the Russians are saying, and this is from the Russian perspective, I do not necessarily have to agree with that position, but just put yourself in their shoes. That's their perspective. They are saying that if we were prevented in 1962 from establishing a military base in Cuba, 90 miles away from the United States of America, and we suffered the consequences. We had to leave Cuba, you know, with our tails in between our legs. Why should we then allow you, you know, decades after, in 2022, to not only establish a base, but to allow Ukraine to join NATO? And we all know the implications of Ukraine joining NATO. There's an Article 5 in that North Atlantic Treaty where any incursion into a NATO member country, it is a declaration of war. And all of NATO's, all the 30 members of NATO will descend on you. And you really will struggle. Because if you put, you know, the Russian military might together, their population of about 150 million, their GDP of about 12 trillion, it's nowhere near that of NATO when they decide to pool resources and descend on the Russians. So I think that we are where we are because of lack of, you know, proactive leadership. As far back in 2014, will you believe that the respected Henry Kissinger, the 98-year-old, not 98-year-old, you know, former U.S. Secretary of State who served under Nixon and Ford. He put out an article in the Washington Post in 2014, and in his book, The World Order, a copy of which I have here, he warned about these consequences and put together, if you don't mind, these suggestions, these recommendations. I'll read through quickly. It says, leaders of all sides should return to examining outcomes, not compete in posturing. Here is my notion of an outcome compatible with the values and security interests of all sides. 1. Ukraine should have the right to choose freely its economic and political associations, including with Europe. 2. Ukraine should not join NATO, a position I took 7 years ago when it last came up. 3. Ukraine should be free to create any government compatible with the express will of its people. Wise Ukrainian leaders would then opt for a policy of reconciliation between the various parts of their country internationally. They should pursue a posture comparable to that of Finland. That nation leaves no doubt about its fierce independence and cooperates with the West in most fields, but carefully avoids institutional hostility toward Russia. 4. It is incompatible with the rules of the existing world order for Russia to annex Crimea, but it should be possible to put Crimea's relationship to Ukraine on a less fraught basis. To that end, Russia will recognize Ukraine's sovereignty over Crimea. Ukraine should reinforce Crimea's autonomy in elections held in the presence of international observers. The process will include removing any ambiguities about the status of the Black Sea Fleet at Sevastopol. These are principles, not prescriptions. People familiar with the region will know that not all of them will be palatable to all parties. The test is not for absolute satisfaction, but balanced dissatisfaction. If some solution based on these or comparable elements is not achieved, the drift toward confrontation will accelerate. The time for that will come soon enough. Unquote. So you see, Ukraine's foreign policy too has not helped its cause. I think that President Zelensky was a bit too naive.
We will examine how Ghana as a state is helping to get its people, its nationals in Ukraine, you know, out of danger. The Foreign Affairs Ministry issued a statement, and yesterday, somewhere in the evening, or that was in the night, and it says, among other things, that the ministry, through its missions in Bern, Switzerland, and the honorary consulate in Ukraine, are in touch with the Ghanaian students in Ukraine through their leaders. A list of students has been compiled to facilitate an evacuation exercise that following the closure of the Ukrainian airspace, it had become challenging to airlift our compatriot from Kiev and other parts of the country. Hence, the only viable means of evacuation is by land to neighboring countries such as Moldova, Belarus, Slovakia, and Hungary. Discussions with the authorities in Switzerland, Turkey, Poland, among others, Romania, to assist with the smooth evacuation of Ghanaians in the Ukraine are far advanced. language we are so used to, and sometimes it means practically nothing. We hope this time that is not the context. The officials of the relevant Ghana diplomatic missions and honorary consuls are on standby to facilitate the passage of students who had commenced their journey. And yesterday in the morning, on the morning show, we heard some of the students were already trying to leave and were so unsure how they were leaving. The government has put in place the necessary package to facilitate the transportation, accommodation, feeding, medical support, etc., to ease the burden of our compatriots. As the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration continues to engage with other stakeholders such as the Ghana Scholarship Secretariat, the security services, and other state institutions, we urge our compatriots to remain calm as measures are finalized for their imminent safe evacuation. The ministry will keep updating the general public on the progress of the evacuation. As I listened to some of the students yesterday, somebody who had just 2 bottles of water has started drinking 1 bottle and didn't know where to get the next when that was finished. Someone has some, biscuits, and it wasn't much. Shops had been closed, and the rest of them, they were sleeping in, train stations. And as you can see, the pictures from CNN, Al Jazeera, all over, it is really, really terrible. Let's go to our guest on Zoom. Let's begin with Professor Kojo Apieje Tuya of the University of Ghana Law School. What's your reading of what is happening, and what do you see to be the likely impact? Already we are seeing the impact on struggling economies like ours that need e-levy to survive.
Thank you, Samuel. Sorry, Samson. Thanks for having me. And I'm sorry where I am. My video is not working very well, so
that's okay, Prof. That's okay.
Thank you. So, regarding the situation in the Ukraine, it constitutes serious violations of international law. I think the international relations people will also look at it from a different perspective, because international relations is about what really happens in international in international politics, geopolitics, and so on. But international law is looking at what ought to be, and if you are looking at it from that angle, you can see serious violations of international law from the perspective of from the angle where Russia has taken this course of action. And when there are violations of international law, certainly there are repercussions. So quickly, I want to go through some of these violations, and then I will come to the situation in Ghana. First of all, Russia is talking about the fact that it has recognized some 2 republics, and these 2 republics are being attacked by Ukraine. Recognition of states in international law is up to any state. It's a political act of recognizing a state and developing a relationship with the state. But it comes to certain conditions, and these conditions are cemented usually by the recognition of the state by an international organization such as the UN. In this case, the UN has rejected Russia's attempt to recognize these states. And so the next issue is that it could border on aggression. And apart from that, there's also the issue of annexation of the territory, as well as issues about conquest in relation to the laws of war. And so looking at it from these angles, Russia cannot claim that it is saying that it wants to demilitarize Ukraine and is sending peacekeeping forces. All these elements of demilitarization and peacekeeping come in after a war has been fought and concluded, and the parties begin to sit down at the negotiating table. That's where you talk about demilitarization, you talk about demobilization, you talk about disarmament, reintegration, and so on. So on different fronts, Russia is violating international law. Now, the impact of it in terms of, specifically in the African context, it can be direct and indirect. And most of it could be negative. For example, you're talking about the fact that Ukraine engages in what we call academic diplomacy. But there's a number of African students studying over there. So it is the universities are promoting the good name of Ukraine, of course, also at the same time getting some money for the universities. But it's also the Ukrainian government is also helping the universities to sell the name of Ukraine through education. And so it is creating problems for African students studying there. According to the figures, there are about 1,000 or so Ghanaian students alone. There are a number of Nigerian, Ethiopian, Egyptian, and other students studying there. And so that is going to affect the academic calendar. It's going to affect students' ability to complete their programs. And so that is one area we need to look at. Already, you know that most of them actually go and study medicine. You know how the medical school situation is in Ghana. And so it's going to compound that problem. Ukraine is also a major producer of wheat. Ukraine and Russia, I understand, provides about 50%, 30% of the whole production of wheat in the world. Ghana is not a major consumer of wheat, but it is going to have an indirect impact because we use wheat for bread and other products, and not directly eating the wheat as maybe we do with rice.
Right.
So that impact is also going to be felt there. And then we also want to look at the sanctions. The sanctions that the Western world has started imposing on Ukraine, on Russia. The impact is not only going to be felt by Russians or in Russia, but also on Western countries. And so indirectly, companies and other organizations are being asked to sacrifice so that they will comply with the sanction directives so that it will bite Russia. Now, when it begins to bite these companies and the countries themselves, it means that it is going to affect the kind of support they are going to give to African countries that are dependent on aid and loans and so on from these countries. Because already we know the impact of the COVID pandemic on support and assistance to African countries. The problem has not come to an end, and this sanctions issue has also come in. It means that if US is earning less, it's going to earn less because of the sanctions. The impact is going to be felt indirectly on Ghana and other countries that depend on aid and other assistance from the US and from the European countries.
Right.
So that is also another thing we need to look out for. So all these are issues that in the end is going to affect us.
Right.
If you talk about petroleum as well, Russia is a major oil producer as well as producer of gas. And so that is also going to affect the cost of gas and or petroleum on the international market. Now around Brent crude is selling for over $100 and it's at its high for the past 7 or 8 years.
Right.
The positive that I can see, just one I can see is where if Russia is not allowed to produce so much because of the sanctions, it would allow for African countries that produce oil and gas to step up and to be able to earn more from that. And also when the oil prices go up, the oil producers in Africa will also benefit from the windfall. And I understand we could earn, Ghana, for example, could earn over $3 billion if this situation continues.
An interesting last note there, how much faith you have in the African to be able to step up to the game in respect of this, particularly where there's a lot of money. Too bad we don't have so much to show for that. But Professor Enin, I'm coming to you shortly so that we look at the question of whether this crisis has actually started yet, because it does appear that this is going to be a third world war. But Dr. Theo Echampon, we already are hearing Ukraine is asking that the sanctions that are being issued are not biting enough. They are asking for an embargo on Russian oil and the rest of them. Can you educate us a bit more about what the consequences will be?
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. It's interesting times that we live in. And I am particularly worried because I see a difficult few months ahead for countries like Ghana. Going back to the question you asked, sanctions historically, I have not seen them to generally have worked or be as effective in trying to prevent certain state actors from engaging in what they do. And those who are better informed on international relations can, attest to this. And in the context of the Russia-Ukraine issue, the sanctions that have been announced so far, if you actually look at the narrative and the rhetoric, it looks as though it's actually not or hasn't had the desired effect. But importantly, you can actually see since yesterday the announcement that they're going to personally freeze some of Putin's assets, and then the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov's assets as well. But I think the one that might make a bit of a difference really is the attempt to get Russia out of the SWIFT banking system, and also to sort of put some sort of embargo on Russian oil exports. Those ones perhaps may have a bit of a bite, but it actually goes both ways, because as much as they want to, for example, take Russia out of SWIFT, we know that the Europeans are also entirely dependent to an extent on Russian gas imports to meet their energy security needs. So you can actually see initially when the attempt was being made to get Russia out of the SWIFT system, the Europeans and a number of the countries, including the likes of Germany, were very hesitant in trying to, get Russia out of that. So everybody would suffer one way or the other. And in the context of economies like Ghana, I am particularly even more worried, just because we have a weak global recovery. We have the issues of, global supply chain crunch, which is manifesting in increasing inflation, and we have relatively low productivity as well. And when you combine all of that, given the context of the conflict, then you can easily see why if oil prices go up, I've seen some forecasts around $130 a barrel thereabout, it would have a big direct impact on the Ghanaian economy, with inflation going up and people paying more at the pump. If you look at the latest Ghana Statistical Service, numbers for their inflation bulletin, you look at it and there's food and non-food inflation. And if you actually look at the non-food inflation, the two biggest year-on-year increments has actually come from transport, which is about 17% up year-on-year, and then housing, water, electricity, gas, another almost 29% year-on-year. And these are predominantly to do with, energy prices and oil and gas prices. So that's one thing that we would have to be concerned about. The second other thing I think Prof alluded to is wheat and fertilizer. So Russia, together with Belarus and I think Canada, are the three biggest producers of fertilizer in the world. And then with wheat, about 30% of global supply comes from both Russia and Ukraine. So with all of the issues happening and with the conflict, you should see this then manifesting or impacting within the supply chain, but ultimately it would drive up inflation and make things a bit more difficult for countries like Ghana that are usually more sort of import dependent on some of these economies.
Interesting. And I'm going to proceed in with that question, whether we are just starting or if we are anywhere close to looking to the end of this.
No, Samson, this is just the beginning, or probably these are the
Prof, hold on just a minute for me. Let's hear what UK has been saying.
Today, the UK is sanctioning the following 5 Russian banks: Rossiya, IS Bank, General Bank, Promziaz Bank, and the Black Sea Bank. And we are sanctioning 3 very high net worth individuals: Gennady Timchenko, Boris Rottenberg, and Igor Rothenburg. Any assets they hold in the UK will be frozen. The individuals concerned will be banned from travelling here. And we will prohibit all UK individuals and entities from having any dealings with them. This is the first tranche, the first barrage of what we are prepared to do. And we hold further sanctions at readiness to be deployed alongside the United States and the European Union if the situation escalates still further. The House and
Right, so the US has announced similar sanctions against banking, and like Dr. Theo Champon said, the Ukrainians and many other people believe that it is the swift aspect of it that will make it bite. The world is together somewhat, of course, somewhat, because we know is it China, India, and a couple of places don't want to be associated somewhat. They want to stand, neutral, so to speak. Let's hear Joe Biden too quickly.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It'll strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It'll degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It'll hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions. And we're prepared.
Prof, Russian military is advancing into Kiev, streets of Kiev, even in the midst of these sanctions.
No, Samson, you asked the question as to whether this has started. I think we are looking at the initial skirmishes and the grandstanding, using language to create a particular type of impression for those who have access to those news outlets. But I want to do what my fellow panelists have done, particularly Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa, and go back to history. But let me respond first to the UK's rhetoric about sanctions. I mean, Boris Johnson is a diminished prime minister. He's opened up his country to Russian billionaires of very dubious heritage. Sitting on his top economic advisory group is the wife of the former deputy finance minister of Mr. Putin. So the UK's rhetoric about sanctions, 5 big banks, 3 individuals, hardly scratches the surface of what they ought to be doing and can do. But I'm particularly enamored with Biden's language and his choice of words, of people being the aggressors. But I think I would like to follow Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa's argumentation and use a little bit of history. In the aftermath of the Cold War, there was a perception in the West that the logic of realism, that is state interest necessarily being what drives relationships, that logic had diminished. And therefore, we saw particular actions from the West. In 1999, the first steps towards NATO enlargement that encompassed Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. We saw a second phase in 2009. Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, and 2 other countries. Now, in all these efforts at expansion, Russia had indicated a certain concern, and then taking into consideration the history of imperial expansions, Russia had made its voice clear. But we also saw the EU expanding in 2008 and NATO furthermore in 2008. Even a pro-Western president like Boris Yeltsin, or at least a Russian president who was not as aggressive as Putin, expressed deep reservations, particularly when NATO in 2008 in Bucharest specifically placed on the agenda the admission of Georgia and Ukraine. So, not taking anything at all from my brother Kwejo Appiagyei Etua about international law, law also works and it's effective when it recognizes the needs and the desires or the legitimate needs of some states. Now, this has not just happened. And when I say this is just the beginning, is because it took almost about 3 weeks of grandstanding, the movement of troops, the hula balooing. Putin has tested the mettle of Western leaders and have found them to be weak. And therefore, he's doing what I agree with Kwejo. I mean, this is an illegality, okay? But in the aftermath of the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, Putin saw his chance. That the gamut of Western leaders that we have now will not back their words with action. And we've seen it in Ukraine. That even when they talk sanctions, it is selected sanctions that does not hurt their own national interests. Okay, and it is this selectiveness that is changing the narrative from Kiev, because their allies are not backing them the way that they thought they would back. So this is just the beginning. Russia will continue to move. There's going to be a disastrous humanitarian crisis in Europe. And the very fact, Samson, that war can break out in 21st century Europe is simply mind-boggling. But this is the failure, the consistent failure over time to make the assessment as to the potential dangers that first, the actions of the West, its enlargement towards the East, and the reservations of the Russians were overlooked. Okay, and the narrative from the Western media and Western academic sectors does not want to bring in the historical aspect of this analysis. And if we don't do that, then I think we are looking at it from only one side. But something I cannot finish without talking about our own role, Ghana's role, and its positioning, particularly with respect to dealing with the students who are in Ukraine. In the last couple of months, I think every time we've spoken, I've come back to one thing: the quality of intelligence assessments and analysis that feeds into the policy making and decision making process. I mean, the ex post facto narrative that, oh, we are now trying to get our students out and they may have to go to Poland and Hungary and Belarus. I mean, it ought not to have come to that. The security perception and the threat perceptions have been clear for weeks on end. And I remember there were certain phases in our history when immediately the signals were being sent that tensions were rising, we would have sent external intelligence agents, either from Accra or from one of our embassies or high commissions, to go to the ground and make a solid assessment of what from the Ghana side we thought the threats were, how our students and our nationals could be affected, and how we could evacuate them. And I think it would be quite nice if somebody somewhere can tell us whether these assessments were done. Otherwise, the talk about how to evacuate them and embassy in Geneva is just hot air. What is the basis that we think they can go to Poland or to Moldova or to Belarus? Upon what assessment are these decisions being made? And I think for me, this disconnect between solid analysis, you may call it intelligence, whatever, that feeds into the decision-making process is one of the lacunae that we need to look at. But this is just the beginning, and I agree with the other panelists. It's going to affect food, oil prices.
Even the almighty, somewhat China, which is supposed to have thousands of nationals in Ukraine, is now evacuating its nationals. It's just told them that they'll be evacuated at short notices, and several flights were being made available to get them out of that country. So will you say they were also not proactive?
No. China, this is a deliberate part of the real politic. China benefits and supports what is going on. So pulling out its citizens prior to the crisis would have been a stab in the back of the planning of what Putin sought to do. I'm sure they've negotiated safe corridors, safe, passages. In the grand scheme of geopolitics, sacrificing your nationals but ensuring that they are still safe is part of the game.
There are at least 15,000 Indian nationals who are also stuck in Ukraine.
Well, that was a bad assessment on their side. Something for those of us who are even far from Ukraine, and I think no one on your panel today will deny that the amassing of troops and weaponry and materiel pointed to something very definite. Putin's grandstanding, his language, either what came out of his mouth or his body posturing, was very clear that they've always had this vision of expansion. And that because of the role of Ukraine particularly, and its strategic position, even in the USSR days, that Ukraine had to be very careful in the way that it played its politics. And I think Honorable Okututa Blackwell read some phrase that I like very much.
Right. Okay. Right. Let me get briefly a comment from Gary Nimako, and then I get all of you to wrap up. Looking forward to solutions, and including more particularly how to get Ghanaians back to safety, and how to steer the economy away from the impact of this onslaught by Russia on Ukraine. Yes, so Gary, what's your reading of what is going on, and being someone who is within the corridors of power, Are there already, as it were, discussions and meetings going on about the impact of this development on our economy?
Good morning, Samson, and good morning to your distinguished panelists. I think that we must all understand that basically war is something nobody should detain. But it is very clear that this war would certainly have an effect or an impact on our economy, especially with the surging oil prices and gas. It's expected. But government is doing everything possible to make sure that there are some factors that will ameliorate the effects of this, impact on our economy. Now, on the students' front, the ministry put up a statement yesterday, and tomorrow they will do a full press conference on the matter to let Ghanaians know the steps being taken to ensure that our citizens are evacuated from Ukraine and brought to Ghana in one piece and not in pieces. But I already made a point that there was a failure in intelligence, and I think you were very clear when you asked the question as to other nationals being trapped also in Ukraine. Clearly, there were some words that were being thrown in here and there. But, sometimes you realize that, yes, nations will throw in words and they will just war. I mean, words instead of war. They don't really, more or less go in with the real troops to try and attack. So other countries are making steps to ensure that they take their citizens out of the country. We are also doing the same. I don't think that there was really a failure of intelligence because Ukraine itself was sitting there. Before they got up one morning, the airport was bombed. They got up one morning, the citizens were being attacked to the sky, right buildings. So clearly, I would also say there was intelligence failure on the part of Ukraine. Russia.
What did you expect Ukraine to do? Because their land is what was the target. So what did you expect them to do? To start running out of their country?
I mean, they should have been defending themselves from the Russian aggression.
They are doing so. They are doing so. You are aware of that, are you not?
Something you agree with me that the size of Russian military might, even though there are a lot of warheads in Ukraine, clearly the numbers cannot match it. They cannot match it. And I was thinking earlier on that NATO will just step in, but clearly looking at the posture of NATO, it is not clear that they want to come in militarily. And now they are started with these sanctions. With these sanctions, I'm not too certain can really bite. I'm not certain can it really bite. And they are doing so carefully, looking at their own national interest as well. So I think it's a war which has just started. Let's pray and hope that it doesn't escalate. We can get our citizens into this country so that at least for some reason, whatever is going on, this thing can come and abate one way or the other.
Interesting. Okay, so gentlemen, let's now look at how we deal with Ghanaians, not only students, Ghanaians, Ghanaian nationals who are there, and how we deal with the potential impact. It's already affecting the world, and I've heard some people in government already begin to sound to citizens that we should get ready because we're going to pay more for fuel and other things. Yes.
Yes, so I'll come to the evacuation bit after these preliminary comments. First of all, it is important to emphasize that the current sanctions regime would not work. And there's a certain lack of sincerity about the sanctions that are being imposed by the West. I very much agree with Professor Enin and Dr. Tue Champong that these sanctions barely scratch the surface. The only sanction that will hit Russia at its nerve center is sanctions on oil and gas. So far, all the sanctions have conveniently, because Europe depends on Russia for about a quarter of its oil needs, about 2/3 of its gas needs. So they leave out oil and gas. Meanwhile, that is what will get Putin to begin to pull the brakes. Because if we underestimate what is going on, clearly when you listen to Putin, this is just the beginning. He wants regime change. He doesn't want to see Zelensky in charge of Ukraine. So stop these. I mean, yesterday's sanctions was a joke that you are going to freeze assets of Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and Putin in Western nations. Where are they traveling to? The people are at war, commanding their troops, and you say that they will care about traveling. You're imposing visa bans, and you are freezing their assets. Big joke. Look, the United States of America has the world's biggest petroleum strategic reserves, over 700 million barrels, if it is really committed to its allies. When you impose sanctions on Russian oil and gas, release some of your strategic reserves. The pipelines have been well, constructed from Louisiana, Texas, all the way to Europe. It's not difficult to achieve if you are really committed to ensure that your allies, Europe, doesn't really bear the brunt. In any case, if Europe and the United States of America feel the heat a bit, isn't it better that we all agree that we suffer some inconvenience now to save lives and to protect the territorial integrity of Ukraine? So I am totally disappointed at these, insincere, sanctions that are being outlined. Then number two, Samson, in this discussion, we need to put the United Nations at the center of blame. We have been talking about UN reforms for decades. Ghana and other countries. How does the United Nations feel when the whole world saw the UN Security Council meeting yesterday? Ironically, Russia has taken its position as chairman of the UN Security Council now. They are chairing the UN Security Council. Their permanent rep vetoed the decision that 16 member countries, including Ghana, has made. The majority of countries at the UN Security Council. But because of the P5, because of the veto of these permanent 5 nations. So you have a 193 member United Nations body and only 5. What the 188 think doesn't matter when only 1. So as it is now, only 1, Russia, yesterday vetoed any progress to be made by the United Nations. So the United Nations has become impotent. It's been rendered toothless. We cannot have a situation where we refuse to reform the United Nations and only 5 member countries take us to ransom. You see how now it's affecting the West and they are complaining about this veto regime. It's the same way in other instances. When it has suited them, you see, either the US or France, take positions against the larger interests of the international community. It is time to democratize the United Nations. Then you see something. In all the analysis about the implications, the focus has been on the economy. But I will submit that we should be more worried about the security implications for our sub-region. You know why? France has been assisting us to contain violent extremism. You do know that violent extremism is at an all-time high. Terrorists have taken over. You have all of these Al-Qaeda of the Maghreb, ISIS, Boko Haram. They are in control of Mali. They are in control of the majority of land space in Burkina Faso.
There's a real threat in our border towns.
Exactly.
In Ghana, the NCC has done a research, empirical, that shows this. And the national security has also taken note of that. Apparently, they are doing something about it.
So you see, the countries that are helping us, France has 5,000 troops in the sub-region now. Germany is supporting with weapons, as you do know, some artillery support. You have the Russians, who are now preferred by French West Africa. Their Wagner group is all over in Africa, at least helping to contain the situation. Now with what is happening in Ukraine, they are going to shift focus. They are likely to withdraw their troops to focus on the conflict in Ukraine. And that is going to affect us. The terrorists are going to have a field day in the sub-region. So I am deeply worried about
our
that.
evacuation, efforts.
Now the evacuation
because
effort,
you are the ranking on foreign affairs.
Yes, earlier in the week, I disagreed with government when the initial position was that our students should just seek shelter and go into hiding. I said it was inadequate. It was an unhelpful intervention. Days after that, I now see a shift in position. Government is now moving in. And as the students have confirmed, I've been in touch with them. As we speak, they are moving to the borders that Ukraine shares with Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary. They tell me that the Polish border has become so choked. There are over 50,000 people there.
That's
and
right.
It's difficult to have access.
That's right.
So some buses have been provided and they are moving. Students who were in Vinnytsia, in Ternopil, and then Kiev are on the move as we speak. I'm told they will be arriving by midnight. And so far, they are good. There was only a scare yesterday in Kiev when a train that some of our students were in came under attack.
Right.
But fortunately, they escaped
unhurt. In the morning, there was this guy who was afraid that even that opportunity that presented itself to join the train, he wasn't too sure because people had suggested that the train could be a target.
Yes. So I agree with Professor Enin that as a country, we need to have an evacuation policy based on a superior intelligence gathering mechanism. I was disappointed that it was as recent as 24th, just 2 days ago, that our embassy, we don't have a resident diplomatic mission in Ukraine. So the embassy in Bern, Switzerland, has concurrent responsibility. It was only 2 days ago that they asked for the list. But these students had organized themselves as far back as 24th January, had written to the embassy, giving them names. They have 959 registered members, and they, on their own, they had some disaster, management system, where to gather and how to leave. They had their phone numbers, addresses, and all of that. The embassy,
as far as January,
did not respond to their letter, 24th January. They didn't respond to the second letter on the 18th of February. So it was 24th, after the strike, that they were now gathering data, finding out who they are. It's not good. Else, in other jurisdictions, they have data of who their nationals are, where they stay, and all of that. So in any emergency, they can act swiftly. I recall that during the COVID evacuations, there was one European country. They reached out to our mission. They didn't even know how many students, even those on government scholarship. And that ambassador always tells me that you people must do something about your emergency response, your record keeping, and your consular obligations towards your people. So this is a lesson that we should improve on our evacuation strategies.
Thank you.
But I want to commend the government for the evacuation so far, and I pray that our students will come to us safely.
Thank you very much. Dr. Theo Champong, Mr. Okujeto is not excited about the sanctions so far, and you are also somewhat not excited. But is it not something that they are trying to graduate instead of, start on a setting, high scale? And as we know, Russia is already reacting by way of closing its airspace. There is threats of restricting of its airspace in retaliation, and it's already doing that to UK and a few other places.
Yeah, like I said, historically sanctions have never worked, and as Honorable Okujeto has also very well articulated, in this particular instance, it's just selective sanctioning. And what then happens is you have this sort of tit for tat. It's a game of two big geopolitical powers literally sort of fighting in this regard. But remember that I don't think Putin is necessarily perturbed by the current round of sanctions, and he seems hell-bent on achieving the set objectives that they have for themselves. The historical antecedent, again, has been very well explained by Honorable Okujeto and Professor Enin, so I wouldn't go into that. But what is quite clear in all of this is that the sanctions are selective. Number two, they would not work. If you want it to work, you have to go for the jugular. And then number three also is the fact that in all of this, Ukraine is being left to its own fate, right? So all the talk about, NATO will come in to help and all of that, when push came to shove, and the president of Ukraine yesterday on TV said it quite clearly, it looks like they have been literally abandoned to fight a much more superior aggressor in this case. So for me, it's just a manifestation of the failure of the whole international diplomatic system, where some countries are far more superior than others. And yesterday, likewise, I watched the UN Security Council meeting, and it was interesting in the sense that the Russian envoy was chairing, and literally they had a veto, as much as the US, Britain, China have also in the past vetoed, right, other proposals that they felt was not in their geopolitical interest. So we have these sort of 5 countries more or less controlling the fate of the other 180 plus countries in the world. And that perhaps needs to change. And I fully support the call by Honorable Akujeto Ablaka. In fact, it was one of the points I was going to make for a reform of the whole global international diplomatic order and even, the security architecture as well. For our Ghanaian students, I think what is clear is we need to negotiate some safe passage and security corridors for them. I don't know too much of the preparations in that regard, so perhaps I'll just limit my comment at this point.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Kojo Appiah-Etua. How do we get out of this, really?
Well, it's, I don't know if we can really get out of this easily, because, when the Gorbachev caused the collapse of the Soviet Union, he wasn't forgiven. In fact, I happened to be around that time in Russia not long after that, and the old people were unforgiving, and the younger folks were happy about it. And if you go to the universities, they were happy to meet American lecturers and so on teaching there and wanting to go to the US. And so I think if you probably do a poll today, the older folks who may still be alive would want to say that at least now Russia is flexing its muscles and the humiliation is suffered when the Soviet Union collapsed. They are gaining or regaining that kind of glory and honor that they think they also deserve. And so if the West doesn't really go beyond the sanctions regime to really ensure that Putin does not succeed in Ukraine, it is going to recreate the Soviet Union empire. They started with what they call the Commonwealth of Independent States. It didn't really work. But gradually, they went into Georgia and created 2 independent states. They came into Ukraine and created 2 independent states. And Crimea was also annexed and so on. So it is not going to end there. Now, somebody was making this argument that NATO can go beyond where it is now, because NATO is saying that we are only bringing troops into NATO countries. We cannot go into Ukraine. And that is a stab in the back, because it is as a result of Ukraine's interest in joining NATO that has led to where it is today. So NATO should, for example, create a no-fly zone, create a safe corridor for arms to go into Russia and so on. But I don't know if that may even solve the problem. But at least that is what NATO can do for it to be seen as really being serious, apart from all the rhetoric that is going on. So we are in for a situation where there are going to be some reversals. We thought that in the 21st century, humanity has moved to a level where war is no more the means to assert oneself in global politics. But that is what is coming. And so if we combine that with cyber attacks and so on, we are not in a good place. And it is important for global leaders to sit up and look at the new world order that China is already trying to create, and Russia is also coming into the picture now. So we need to really play our game well. UN should be reformed, as has been suggested, and it's a key way to resolving some of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me get to Professor Kwesi now. Now, Professor Kwesi, from the way the tit for tat.
Something.
Yes.
Something.
Yes. Hold on, Professor Kwesi. From the way the tit for tat sort of bans are happening, this is going to further destroy the recovery of the airline industry that we're beginning to see due to COVID. So how do the world leaders navigate this? You have had opportunity to advise the UN beyond ECOWAS and AU, the UN, on how to, use compromise. In this day and age, we thought that we're done with such manner of war.
The problem is that the international system itself is not consistent with the application of its principles and the underpinning norms. So Western governments are now screaming and shouting that Russia has vetoed, the discussions yesterday. But we all do remember that prior to the invasion of Iraq, that the dignified Colin Powell came into the council chamber and basically lied through his teeth. That there were mobile nuclear reactors and blah, 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 blah. That America and the UK actually intervened without UN backing. There was no mandate. Okay, so the first thing is about ensuring that the principles underpinning the way that the international system works, that those principles are applied consistently and fairly over time. And in this particular case, history seems to be on the side of the Russians, unfortunately so. And this ties in to what I term as Geopolitics 101. No major country will allow another power on its doorstep. I mean, were China to become so powerful that it extended its reach to Mexico and Canada, I mean, we can imagine what the US is going to. But in all this, when elephants fight, we are going to suffer. So we are going to see the coastal drive of extremist groups becoming more robust. We're already beginning to see it in northern Cote d'Ivoire, in northern Benin. I think we are seeing movements and shifts along our own borders and boundaries. The Wagner group is going to be more assertive. Look, all jokes aside, there is a resurgent Russia. Mr. Putin, irrespective of the demonstrations around the country against war, Russians feel that the disgrace and the sense of failure resulting from the collapse of the USSR is being corrected. So we are going to see considerably more violence, more instability in our part of the world. Finally,
thank you. Yeah,
the sanctions just won't work because there's a lot of hypocrisy around.
Interesting. And like you say, his own citizens, nationals who have different opinions and feel that they don't support he's going against Ukraine, he's just arresting them en masse and dumping them in and with serious implications for their criminal records in future, because it's not just arresting them over demonstrating, but there was an explanation I got that they are triggering it. If you are arrested for demonstrating, it's likely going to impact on your ability to secure a job in future in the Russia. And come on. Yes, Gary, what will be your last very final comments?
Something, let me state authoritatively on your show that a lot of information channeled by Mr. Blackwell is false. First of all, You see, the indication that he spoke to the students, and then they said that the honorary consul did not respond to them until recently. That statement is false.
I said the embassy
You see,
in Switzerland.
You see,
It says the embassy in Switzerland did not respond to them on time.
24th January and 18th February.
The point I'm making is that Honorable Ablakwa did not inform you on the show that he cross-checked these facts from the embassy. He didn't tell you that.
But this is what the students have been talking about.
You cannot hear just one side, and I'm telling you the other side of the story. You cannot hear just one side. You are telling what the students have told you. I'm telling the other side. You are telling me that story you are putting on the show is false.
We have heard the students as late as yesterday on the Super Morning Show.
You see, Sammy, I'm saying you cannot hear one side of a story, and you're a lawyer and you know that. You must always hear both sides of the stories.
We are hearing you. I'm only putting to you what we have been told.
I'm telling you, the story on the other side, that statement put out there is false. Number two, a lot of the students who are there now are there on their own. They are there on their own. And you see, they were also advised to leave way before the war broke out.
Who did that?
That's the story on the other side.
Who did that?
From the embassy.
The embassy did that?
Number three. Sammy, hear the other side of the story. Or the alternate pattern. Hear the other side of the story. Your show is a
please, we are hearing you, but we are we are challenging the claims. So please, can we proceed with the discussion without saying hear the other side? You are being heard. That's why you're on TV.
Number three.
So wait before you go to your number three. Gary, hold on. Before you go to your number three, you are simply just throwing the statement out there that the students should not be trusted, and that Okujeto Ablakwa, who they have also been speaking to, should not be trusted. Why should we take your word for it?
You see, what Okujeto ought to have done, that being somebody in opposition, having been given information from the students, he ought to have reasonably inquired from officialdom what the status quo was. But to rely on only one side to come to your show to to inform the general public that it is a story as it is. Clearly, it's just politics. It's just politics. Now, Sammy, do you know that there's about 28 students who are on GOG scholarship as we speak?
No, that's not the question I asked. Why should we take your version as against the students and the MP?
Yeah. Do you have a copy of the response from the embassy to their 24th January petition and their 18th February petition? That will settle the matter.
My version is the version being proffered by officialdom. And what is being put out there by Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa is what he clearly should have informed him. My challenge is that when you're informed about something, you want to cross-check. You want to cross-check from officialdom what the status quo is.
You are assuming he hasn't cross-checked. He says he has.
No. You see, when you're listening to him, he didn't tell all whether you cross-checked. He didn't say that. He said that until the war broke out, the students were not attended to by officialdom. And you see, I think it is fair. So it is fair that when you hear a story from one side, we ought to hear from the other side. So you have both sides of the coin, and you can now put it out there and say, well, this is the situation as I've cross-checked. Well, tomorrow, the Minister of Foreign Affairs will give an official press conference to address all these matters. So I will leave it here.
I see. So if officialdom had been responding to them, what accounts to why they are where they are now?
That's why I'm saying a lot of students already left on their own. A lot left. When they were informed to leave, a lot of them left. You see, a few of them, 28 of them are there on government scholarships. A lot of them, they've left. They are there on their own.
No, you are Ghanaian is the question. It's not whether you are on you are on a scholarship or you are not. Once you're a Ghanaian, you are Ghanaian. And in such a situation, your country must come for you.
Yeah, that is why the government of the day is taking proactive steps to ensure that all of them are evacuated from neighboring countries. Because now there's a question of the airspace. So if you are not careful and you go and fly a plane in the airspace, you'll be targeted for maybe an enemy, flight if you are not careful. So they will all be evacuated from the country very soon.
I see. It's rather a difficult thing because I've seen the students and their communications. We have heard nukes. They have been speaking about this and the list that they compiled, all of that. Yeah. I'm sure that
and copies of the
I'm sure that it would be unfair to suggest that the nukes guys who are doing all of this will all come to radio and just be lying to everybody else that these communications were unresponded, or that there was not a favorable, reaction to them, if there was. You don't agree?
Sami, you see the point I'm making. Now the two of you are Sami and Sami, so I'll say Sami square. You see, you will agree with me that when the communications are sent to official sources, there are receipts to it. There will be acknowledgement. If there is no response to your communication, you must send a reminder. But I'm telling you that authority, that this matter that they are talking about, authority are saying that it is not as it is. A lot of the students left on their own. Few Ghanaians are around there. The few students are around there, and I agree with you that every Ghanaian life matter. It doesn't even matter whether you are there on a government scholarship, or you are there on your own, or you are there as somebody who has gone to school there, or you are there as a worker, or you are there whatever it is.
Okay, so it's okay. Before we turn this to one of our typical thing of the partisanship, let's take a break and return to the Parliament of Ghana, where it does appear that e-levy is damaging it.
This is the second time the First Deputy Speaker has taken the chair and has made a ruling which in fact was to overrule a position I had earlier on established before the House. The First Deputy Speaker has contended, and rightfully so, on several occasions, that he is not the Speaker. The penchant of the First Deputy Speaker to overrule my rulings is, to say the least, unconstitutional, illegal, and offensive. The Deputy Speakers and I would deliberate on how to present a more coherent and uniform structure in respect of rulings so that the House is guided. What is happening in this Parliament is completely unacceptable. And I'm not sure you have appreciation of the temperature of the country. Neither am I sure you know the arduous nature of the responsibility that have been placed on your shoulders. You are all mature adults. What I'm talking about is still happening. The Marshal Department, get ready. I'll be compelled to get a marshal to get people arrested and sent out. You are saying, hey, Parliament is not a place for joking. It's a place for business, serious national business. The Parliament we are in has never been in Ghana, even Gold Coast. This is a different type of Parliament. We might be prepared to change, to accept the decision of the people and work together. You make me sick. Will you shut up? You rule out of order in the House. Important, I diffuse some fake news which is being circulated, that I granted an interview to say that Honorable Adjoa Safo received permission from me to absent herself from Parliament on health grounds. I want it to be known by all that I have not granted any such interview anywhere. I have not said anything like that anywhere. And the votes and proceedings of the House are so loud that she is absent without permission for all those days. That is on the votes and proceedings of the House. It's not the Speaker who determines who is present and who is absent.
Right. So, as has become very typical of this 8th Parliament, it began with fisticuffs, blows, fighting in the House, leading to an unprecedented sinful conduct of the military entering into that House. To date, we don't know how the military got into that House, because those in charge of the military insist they didn't give any instructions for that purpose. How did that happen exactly? So these people take Ghanaians for dummies. And beyond that, you have seen the fighting that has continued in that House. And we have become, as a nation, a laughing stock in the world. So, when at all is this going to end? Well, the Speaker has issues with the Deputy Speaker. And the Deputy Speaker, the Right Honorable First Deputy Speaker, Joseph Osei Owusu, is joining us this very moment. Newsfile is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. CBG, we stand with you. Edlom Housing, where spacious homes cost less. Duraplast, where Duraplast goes, water flows. Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. Thank you very much, Honorable Joe Wise, for joining us on Newsfile.
Trying to remember the name is not coming, but counsel is appropriate.
Right. My name is Samson Ladi.
Samson, that's right.
Great.
That's right. I'm going old, so forgive me.
That's okay, that's okay. Right. So, just when we thought that there appeared to be some semblance of compromise and calm, particularly within the speakership in the House, Babing returns, and once again, you are accused of having the penchant of unconstitutionally and illegally overruling his decisions. How do you answer to that charge?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Ordinarily, I don't speak back when the speaker speaks. There's been a first one, or the second one, and that was a publication. There's a third one. I think it's unfair if I keep sitting quiet, because the speaker has the opportunity of standing on this, giving him the space to speak. But I must also be heard. And that's why I have issued a statement.
Okay.
Saying that the charge or the allegation that I have done something unconstitutional, I've done something offensive, is most unfair to me. I've given a narration of the matters leading to the ruling. Indeed, I have stated clearly that the motion which I ruled had been admitted by Mr. Speaker himself. There's now disagreement, should I say, or discrepancy as to whether he said I should admit the motion or I should permit the deputy leader to move the motion before secondment or after it has been seconded. I thought I heard that he said after it has been seconded. And if you watch the proceedings, I stated clearly that I'm going by what I heard Mr. Speaker say. So while I thought I was going by what he says, he says rather he said the opposite. Be that as it may, once the motion had been admitted, it ought to be moved. And once it was moved, it had to be ruled upon. The fact that the Speaker may have ruled differently, does it make mine offensive? It only shows that we look at the same thing from different perspectives. And that's why I've taken my time to explain the consequence and the process. I can't understand how, when a motion has been admitted, the administrative part the process of administering the motion happens at his office. It doesn't come to the chamber. Once he has finished that part, he transmits it through the system to the business committee. The business committee programs it and it is advertised on the order paper. I would have thought that is the end of the process of admitting the motion. Now, on the floor of the House, though, if a member raises an issue, the legality or otherwise, we are entitled to consider that. And indeed, as I've stated, it was the Speaker himself who admitted that motion and said it should be moved either before or after. He says before it was seconded. I heard after it was seconded. However, it was moved. And my view was that what the motion he admitted was seeking for, there was in outstanding orders. There's a committee responsible for that anyway. The committee of public accounts is chaired by the minority, and it is a bipartisan committee. So nothing new would be achieved if you put other people from the minority and the majority together and made the chair made the chair to do what is constitutionally and by outstanding orders assigned to a committee. The Speaker may have ruled differently. I don't begrudge him if he did. But to say that because what my ruling is different from how you would have ruled is unconstitutional, illegal, and offensive, is to the height of, in my view, intolerance of other people's views. And that is my challenge.
Yeah, his view is that what you did was not only illegal, unconstitutional, and offensive, but tantamount to insubordination. Now, you say...
Well, the insubordination was in respect of the ruling about the budget, the purported rejection of the budget.
That's right. Now, you say that on that occasion, you characteristically elected not to comment on the Speaker's statement in public in order not to create the impression that there is tension between him and his deputy.
Yeah.
But is there no tension between the two of you?
Frankly, in my view, there's no tension. We disagree on the way we interpret things. Indeed, I've taken my time to explain. When he was chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Committee, I was a ranking member. On a number of occasions, we disagreed strongly. I recall when we were discussing the property rights of spouses, we took two very strong differing views. Because we couldn't reconcile, he actually said that we should refer the bill back to the executive because the leadership can reconcile. I'll recall exactly. That is not the only time we have disagreed. So disagreeing with him is not new. But to say that disagreeing with him now, because probably he's now the Speaker, is insubordination, is most unfair. And in my view, the height of intolerance of other views.
Why do you differ from the way he has sought to educate the general public in Ghana, particularly citing what happens in other jurisdictions? Why do you disagree with his position and you say that the presiding officer, whether it is Mr. Speaker himself, any of his deputies, or a member elected to preside, that presiding officer is duty bound to make a ruling after the objection has been argued?
That is exactly the case. Once a ruling, a motion is brought before the House, whether formally, which is through the system, or in some situations while the person is on his feet. Once a motion is before the House and it is argued, as is in this case, the motion has to be ruled upon. You don't defer unless sometimes the leadership agree that will argue, but will defer other the Speaker's decision, and it often happens that, okay, I'll meet with the leadership on this matter. Sometimes we go and negotiate and you change the tone or what each one is looking for. We reconcile them and we come back and we agree on what to do. Otherwise, the Speaker or the person presiding is bound to rule.
But in the circumstance where these decisions, and clearly you only, as it were, preside over what the members of parliament have brought before the House. Where these matters are sort of a review of the decision already made by the Speaker, is there not a problem?
I'm ready to find where a decision made by the Speaker has been reviewed by me or by the House. I've insisted that, for example, in the decision, the purported decision to reject the House, the decision, reject the budget. The decision was the decision of Parliament, except that the Parliament was not properly constituted to take a decision in accordance with the Constitution and our own standing orders. That review is a review of the decision of Parliament. I propose that if you look at the record, and I invite everybody to look at the record, number present 137. When the vote was ayes 137, noes 0, abstention 0. If you add that together, you get to 137. The Constitution says that at least half of all the members of Parliament should be present. 137 was up to half of all the members present. So that decision was against the Constitution. And whether I declared it or Mr. Speaker himself declared it, it won't change the position. Because it is on record. I did not dream that up.
And you make a promise to Ghanaians that you say, I have never entertained any application for a review of a ruling of Right Honorable Speaker, and I will never do so.
Exactly. If Mr. Speaker makes a ruling, anybody wants to review it, I will not even touch it. I would direct that it goes to Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
So when a matter arises, and it's not a review of the ruling of Mr. Speaker, but a decision of the House, then whilst presiding, I don't have a choice but to rule upon it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Joseph Osei-Wusu, the first Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Ghana. But is the issue, and forgive me, I know this might be a bit of an ambush, but is the issue of whether or not, in the absence of the Speaker and you being in the seat, being entitled to your vote, is it determined?
I've heard that a date has been given for it to be determined, but I haven't heard. I don't think it's up to the date now. I think sometime in March or so.
Okay. Until then, once you take the seat, you will not vote?
Well, in fact, the position has never been that a speaker sitting whilst presiding is entitled to vote. No. The standing order said is, even the Constitution is clear. A speaker or a person presiding does not retain his original vote whilst in the seat. So whilst you're presiding, then your seat, your vote, you're not entitled to it.
Okay.
The controversy that arose at that time was that when voting was ongoing, the second deputy speaker invited the second deputy speaker to take over from me so I can step out and vote. That is where they challenged it. And that's why my position is clear. I can always step down and vote. Indeed, in 2021, yes. I think I put the question and the voice vote was challenged. But before we started the head count, Mr. Speaker came and relieved me. And I went to vote. So it is not new. But, circumstances changed and people look at situations and they think they can take advantage of it. But it has happened in this parliament. It is a parliament. Right Honorable Babin came to relieve me so I can go and vote. I'm sure on this occasion, if it was Right Honorable Babin who came to relieve me, the minority would not have done what it did.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time this morning, sir.
Pleasure, sir.
All right. So that is the first Deputy Speaker, Honorable Joseph Osei-Wusu. he has issued a response to the Right Honorable Speaker Alban S.K. Bagbin on what transpired in his absence. And he says he has chosen this path because the Speaker has the privilege of the use of Order 53(1)(e) of their standing orders, to speak, but he doesn't have that opportunity. And so that's why he has chosen this path this morning. Right. Honorable Kujita Blakwa, what's going on in this parliament?
We are clearly in uncharted waters. We are making history. This is an epic moment for our democracy. I believe strongly that we will come out the better for it. This is the first time we have a hung parliament, 137 NDC, 137 MPP. Even our colleague females are equal, 20 to 20. This is the first time that we are having a Speaker of Parliament who does not belong to the President's party. So we are very much in uncharted waters. We have been used to a president in charge of the country and working with a comfortable majority. Indeed, this is also the first time, if you check our electoral record, that a president goes into a second term with a reduced margin in Parliament, and so reduced to the extent that it is even now equal numbers, a hung Parliament. So what this very novel situation demands is that there will be extreme maturity. Cool health should prevail at all times. We should be more nationalistic and do well to curtail.
You have done 1 year without any of these signs you're talking about.
Curtail the extreme partisanship. So I hope that we will not increase tensions, but we'll be working to reduce tensions. I am really saddened this morning that the first Deputy Speaker has had to take this route. I still insist that he should have taken advantage of conclave that leadership always goes into to raise his concerns.
But the impression has been created out there in the whole world that this is who he is, simply coming there to do, a partisan job of overruling the Speaker.
Look, everybody sees our conduct, and I don't believe that issuing statements, 5-page statements or 50-page statements would necessarily erase the perceptions of what people see. It is for us in our conduct to show, look, the matter in issue relates to a motion that had been filed by the Honorable Atufosin, seconded by the Honorable Muntaka Mubarak, that there should be a bipartisan committee of inquiry into our COVID-19 expenditure. The House approved about $1 billion. We have seen expenditure in excess of $8 billion. In my sector, the Foreign Ministry, when they came and appeared before us, there was an item in the 2021 budget that claimed that they had spent 65.7 million cedis on evacuations. They said they knew nothing about that. They didn't even know that such an account existed. And it's all in the budget. See what happened with the Sputnik V scandal. Look, the House of Commons has had a parliamentary inquiry into COVID-19 expenditure. In South Africa, we have seen same. We have seen same in Tanzania. It's led to even health ministers resigning and all of that, some being fired. The UN has said that what COVID-19 has also brought upon us is violation of human rights and corruption. There has not been transparency with government contracts and all of that. Why is it that in Ghana, some people want to run away from a full-blown parliamentary inquiry into COVID-19 expenditure?
But they raise the counter-argument that all these expenses will go through auditing by the Auditor General. So why do you want to waste your time going over that?
That is where they are wrong. If you read Order 165, the Public Account Committee cannot initiate its own audit. It only assesses audit from the Auditor General. Order 165 is very clear. 165.1 says, the Public Accounts Committee shall consist of not more than 25 members under the chairmanship of a member who does not belong to the party which controls the executive branch of government. 2, the Public Accounts Committee shall be assigned the examination of the audited accounts showing the appropriation of the sums granted by Parliament to meet the public expenditure of the government and of such other accounts laid before Parliament.
Yes, so the point is that after the Auditor General has done its work, it will definitely come back to the House, and there will be an opposition member who is chairing a committee to determine whether or not something went wrong.
We are saying that we have received the 2020 Auditor General's report. The Auditor General did not carry out an audit into COVID-19 expenditure. Meanwhile, the House approved billions of allocations to fight COVID. But it's nowhere in the Auditor General's report. We have written to the Auditor General on a number of occasions, starting from the one who was hounded out of office, Mr. Domlevu, that we demand a special audit into the COVID-19 expenditure. We have had no response. Even after we sent a reminder, the Honorable Atuforsen and the Honorable Muntaka Mubarak sent a reminder to the current Auditor General, there has been no response. So when we don't have an indication that there is a special audit being conducted into COVID-19 expenditure, and our standing orders does not allow the Public Account Committee of Parliament to initiate their own audit, they can only wait and receive audited accounts. A proactive Parliament, a Parliament that does not want to be seen as rubber stamp, as useless, that is not, interested in carrying out its oversight, so far as financial accountability is concerned, must be seen and must actually concretely carry out its mandate in a way that accountability will be exacted from the executive. The principle of checks and balances. That is why parliaments exist. And you see, the order that the first Deputy Speaker relied upon, I am on all fours with the Right Honourable Speaker, Alban Bagbin, that the first Deputy Speaker got it totally wrong. And I see he repeats it in his statement that he relied on Order 191. Let's pay attention to Order 191. Order 191 states, and I quote verbatim, the House may at any time by motion appoint special or ad hoc committee to investigate any matter of public importance. Then there's a semicolon. It says to consider any bill that does not come under the jurisdiction of any of the standing or select committees. We didn't present a bill. This private member's motion was a motion, not a bill, was a motion. So when the first Deputy Speaker relies on this provision, which deals with bills that are already, as it were, arrangements have been made for in our standing orders. In this instance, we are talking about a private member's motion, and we are asking for a special audit.
Okay.
Look, in any case, if you stretch the first Deputy Speaker's, conclusions, it will mean that we cannot have an ad hoc committee again moving forward. That is really the interpretation. Because there is no matter, even the Sputnik V probe that we had, you could have said that, well, the health committee should look at it, or the finance committee should look at it. But we set up an ad hoc committee, a bipartisan special committee to look into those matters. So the Right Honourable Speaker, who is the sole judge of admissibility, had rightly admitted the motion and had initiated steps for this motion to see the light of day, for the committee of inquiry to be established. I mean, what do people have to hide? Why is it that the Ghanaian Parliament alone cannot have a special committee, cannot initiate steps, cannot be seen to be proactive to look into COVID-19 expenditure, which runs into billions? Look, because of COVID-19 expenditure, we recorded the biggest budget deficit in the world. Okay, 15.2%.
Yes. Now,
and you say we shouldn't look into it?
Right. Let me let me hear the two gentlemen we have on Zoom with us briefly on this, and then we'll zoom in on the question that is arising as to whether or not the MP for Dom Kwabenya, Adwoa-Safo, Sarah Adwoa-Safo, her seat will be declared vacant. As the Speaker has confirmed, he has not granted her leave to be out of Parliament. And as the records show, she has been absent for more than 15 sittings of the House, which means, according to the Constitution, automatically, as pronounced by our courts, she loses her seat as an MP. It takes the clerk to so notify the Privileges Committee, and then the election processes for by-election will kick in. Will that really happen? It does appear the NPP is very interested in doing so. There have been revelations about how she's tried to, she's not happy about a number of things, but we have heard some reactions also from her about not being away simply because she wants to be away or that she's holding anybody to ransom. But she had, on health grounds, for herself, for her pregnancy, and, you know, that she had a miscarriage, needed time to recuperate, and then her child also had a problem, needed surgery. And in all these difficult times, you know, we had to charter a private jet to ferry her to the country. Questions are now emerging. Whose money was used for that private jet? Again, she's said to have received, 120,000 Ghana cedis or so. That was from the Chief of Staff. Whose money did the Chief of Staff give her? Is it the state's money? And did she actually receive that? She has some response. We are told reportedly that she was under the impression that this was a birthday gift coming to her child from the father who had promised them that. So, Gary, about this sort of, let's say, because of what Joe Wise has just told us, perceived rifts between the speakership. What do you say about it? And having heard from Joe Wise this morning. Hello, Gary. Please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Great, you are on.
Thank you. What I think ought to happen is that Mr. Speaker, Right Honorable Suman Ababen, should you please calm down a bit. You know, it appears that the manner with which he's speaking, the manner with which his conduct and everything is going, I'm clear in my mind that he appears to be on some theft with his own members of parliament. And maybe the deputy speaker of parliament. But I've heard Honorable Joe Wise speak. I think that there should be some form of cordiality between the two of them. Now, why did we get to where we are now? For me, sitting here, I blame the two members of parliament on our side who went and voted, you know, for him as Speaker of Parliament. That's the beginning of all these problems. Because you know why? Because we should not forget that on the day of the voting, an injunction has been secured in a stand-off case. Served the Clerk of Parliament, Mr. Cyril. He came to the Parliament House, he failed to disclose that the order had been served on him. Then the Parliament was thrown into chaos because he failed to make that disclosure, a very material disclosure. He didn't disclose it. And then till this whole mayhem that you refer to as the military entering the place. All these things could have been avoided if we had just come to Parliament and said, look, honourable members, I have in my hand here a copy of a court order restraining Mr. Kwesi from entering this house. And so therefore I direct Mr. President, please leave the chamber so that the business of the House can commence. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. And he was the source of all the problems that started from the very beginning of the House. Now, be that as is may, now we are confronted with a situation, as Ablakwa said, that we have a Speaker of Parliament who is on the side of the opposition. And it's very clear. It's very, very clear. And it's the first time. And it's also the first time we are having, 137 Parliament, that 117 at par, with one independent working with us or doing business with us. So clearly, if one person is absent or two are absent, it means that the party in power is in trouble of conducting government business. Now, on the issue of Honorable Sarah Joseph, I have not heard him personally speak. I have not heard her personally speak. I haven't heard her speak. I will hear some communications from third parties who are saying that, well, she has some ill health, she has her daughter is sick, and all the the things that are going on. But you see, I'm also aware, as you rightly put out, that there was no permission sought from the Speaker of Parliament prior to a departure to America. But the law is very clear that once you absent yourself from sitting for 15 days, then it means that you'll be referred to the Privilege Committee. I don't know how they intend to go about it, whether they are indeed going to refer her or otherwise. But it's important that she be heard. It's important that she be heard on these matters, because she must show just cause. She must show just cause why she has been absent from parliamentary sittings for 15 days. And I believe that when she is called upon, maybe she can show the just cause as to why maybe she couldn't attend upon Parliament in all these days. If you show the just cause, I think that one can rather give her some reprieve as to why she's been absent. She's not the first person who has been absent from Parliament.
Is it your suggestion that there is something she can say that will, as it were, remedy the situation, that will remove the Constitution's command, Article 97, and also Order 16 of the Standing Orders?
Yeah, that if you look at the Standing Orders of Parliament, it makes it very clear that if you don't attend upon Parliament for 15 sitting days, the Speaker shall refer you without the leave of the Speaker. See, that means the leave ought to be sought first before you depart. But it is very clear here that they say you have to justify sufficient cause for justifying your absence. So the question word here is, what is the reason why you were unable to attend upon Parliament for these 15 days?
Okay,
so
this morning I almost picked my order. I forgot, but I don't remember reading sufficient cause.
Let me quote in extenso.
Yes, go ahead.
Leave of absence.
Yeah.
That's Order 16 will 1.
Right.
Member of Parliament shall attend the services of the House unless leave of absence has been given by him, by the Speaker. Now, Rule 2. Leave of absence may be given by the Speaker to any member who shows sufficient cause justifying his absence, or who is away on official or parliamentary duties. You see, so clearly, and it's a second says a member shall not absent himself sitting for more than 15 sittings without permission in writing of the Speaker. So clearly, what is playing out here is that if indeed, as the Speaker put it out there, that he has not granted any interview to any media house to suggest that yes, he has granted Honorable Sarah Joseph leave to leave the country.
The standing orders you are reading, is that the 1st November 2001? That's what I have, and it does appear what you're reading is a bit different from what I hold in my hand here. 16.1. A member shall not absent himself during a meeting for more than 15 sittings without the permission in writing of the Speaker. Any member infringing this order shall have his conduct referred to the Privileges Committee. 16.2. A member shall be excused from services on the House or on any committee so long as he has leave of absence
Yeah, so clearly, as I'm saying, you cannot just see.
Yeah, so I'm saying that what you are reading that says there is opportunity for you to give a justification that will cure the absence. I think that is not in the November 2000 standing orders, and even if that were there, that will contravene the Constitution.
Something. What does the Constitution say? Tell me the Constitution. What does it say?
The Constitution in Article 97 says that a member of Parliament shall vacate his seat, mandatory, empowering, shall vacate his seat in Parliament if he is absent without the permission in writing of the Speaker, and he is unable to offer a reasonable explanation to the Parliamentary Committee on Privileges from 15 sittings of a meeting of Parliament during any period that Parliament has been summoned to meet and continues to meet.
Yeah, you see, I'm saying the same thing.
Right.
The just cause is still playing out here. You must for a reason. You see, this goes in line with the old adage of the rules of the right to be heard. The Odi or terrain pattern. You cannot crucify a man without hearing the person.
That's right.
As it stands now,
That's
I have not personally heard Major Asafo Honorable why he's away for these 15 days. It could be just cause. It could be no just cause. I think what she said, the committee will now be able to decide whether the reason she's proffering to the committee is just cause or otherwise, so they can decide on her fate.
Right. In the suit brought by Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare against the Attorney General, the Speaker of Parliament, the Electoral Commission, and Honorable Eric Amwating, in the Court of Appeal, the decision of 11th December 2008, there is a portion where the judgment is interesting reading. It says that the plaintiff appellant contends that once a member absents himself from Parliament without explanation for more than 15 sittings, in this case, that member's seat automatically becomes vacant by operation of law. This argument is sound in law, and I accept it. What do you say to that?
Yeah, the ruling is in tandem with the authority that you cited in the Constitution. That is without explanation.
Right.
Without explanation.
The seat is automatically vacant.
It is declared vacant without explanation. So the explanation, what I'm saying, it ought to be given. Why? See, even when you are in school, and the authorities know exactly what you have done, and what you have done, they know the punishment already been present. You are called to the disciplinary committee, and you are asked, justify why you should not be punished for doing A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
So you have explained. Well, in our view, we think that you are still so we are punishing you. So a man ought to be heard before he's condemned.
All right. From what you know, when is she being referred to the Privileges Committee?
I don't know.
Okay, I'll return. Samokuja Toa Blakwa has something to share with us because he believes also that there are other members of Parliament within the NPP who have also breached the Constitution and this standing order and ought not be treating Adjo Asafo discriminatorily because the Constitution frowns on discrimination. I'll return and we'll hear from Dr. Theo Champong and Okujeto Ablakwa. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. It is brought to you by Bank of Africa's strongest group and closest partner, MTN. Everywhere you go, Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. CBG, we stand with you. Edlom Housing, where spacious homes cost less. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. And Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. Now, Dr. Theo Champong, let's go straight to the jugular. What do you say about the seeming rifts? Of course, the entire House is divided. That's what it is, really, NDC, NPP. And then this thing we are seeing with the speakers, how do we resolve that? And then the possibility, we know now that the NPP is almost setting that the Adwoa Safo is becoming a stumbling block, and therefore she needs to be gotten rid of.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting set of events. I think what is quite clear is you can see a lot of anger, and I dare say even maybe frustration by the Right Honorable Speaker in terms of the work that he's doing. But, you know...
Justifiably frustrated?
I think you can see a bit of frustration from his commentary and some of the tapes that you played preceding this conversation. But what Ghanaians voted for in December of 2020 was that we wanted both parties to work a bit more closely together in the interest of the country. And what has rather happened really is the fact that there is a deeply entrenched political or partisan interest, and those interests seem to be overriding the need for the two parties, NPP and NDC, to come and work and deliberate in the broader interest of the country. So this is basically kind of where we are, and like Gary did indicate, the writing was on the wall. If you go back to the very beginning of the constitution of this current parliament in January. So for me, it is not too surprising in that respect. I think the worrying thing is the extent to which this then slows down the ability of government to execute its policy mandate, and ultimately that then hurts the citizenry in that regard. So I personally think the only way to sort of break this deadlock would really be a couple of by-elections. And to the extent that we have one or two, we know of the Asin South one. I don't know what will happen with Honorable Adwoa Safo, but in a democratic dispensation, and people have a right to make some of these calls, particularly when it borders on the use of public finances and public resources. And there are laid down processes in terms of how these should be investigated, if any, and then the outcomes of such investigations. I watched the said interview myself, and the word, as you rightly use, is they are revelations. So let's say they are allegations. We don't know if they have been proven as yet, but I do align with the call by the said group for some sort of investigation into those claims that have been made, but particularly to find out if indeed public finances were involved in the said, activities.
Okay, so you are saying whether they are true or not. I can confirm from very reliable sources the question of the private jet to bring her to the country is a matter of fact, but that it was to bring her for the budget approval, not for the e-levy, and also that it was a private arrangement, not the state involved in renting the jets.
It was coming to my point. Do we know actually paid for that? If it's a private arrangement, and to that extent it's proving to be the case, then I don't know why we are sweating over this. But for those other MPs you are talking about, again, we can substantiate the fact that public monies were involved. And number two, were these part of the normal sort of protocol arrangement as pertains to their service offerings?
The question substantively is that, do you share the view that there ought to be some investigations in this direction?
I think we need to the extent that it borders on the use of public finances, yes, we must do some, at least initial investigations around that. But
Okay.
we need to prove beyond doubt that indeed public monies were used and it's not just somebody's private money.
Unless also those who are claiming so, Honorable Kujeto Ablaka, are willing to make disclosure as to the source of the funding, the 120,000, which we now are hearing reportedly that the one who sent it to her had promised the child, that is his own daughter, that he would do a good birthday for the person, and therefore this was the money that they thought they were receiving from the person, and the person is wealthy enough, so 120,000 is not anything that they would question how he got it.
Something. Let me be very, very honest and candid on your most esteemed platform. We are where we are because our government has chosen the most costly and the most reckless path in managing the outcome of the 2020 elections. Look, the outcome of the 2020 elections is clear that the Ghanaian people voted for a power-sharing arrangement, whether you like it or not. Ghanaians said, go to parliament and work together. We want to have a strong institution. Ghanaians were clearly fed up with the historical characterization of the Ghanaian parliament as a rubber stamp, a lame duck, a toothless institution. And so Ghanaians wanted a parliament that would rise up to the executive. You remember Sam Jonah's lecture where he said that for a healthy democracy, we ought to see a tripod with equal strength. That was the same principle that the propounders of this whole three arms of government, the checks and balances arrangement, from Montesquieu to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that is what they envisaged. But in Ghana, because of how we drafted our constitution, we have had an overbearing executive. I have served in both.
Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh and Professor Raymond Atugba would say an imperial president.
Exactly. Exactly. They couldn't have put it better. Very imperial president. So Ghanaians are saying that, okay, if the constitutional review would continue to delay, we will, through our electoral processes, how we vote, force the change in the balance of power. So what it requires is for leadership to be mature and not to choose this costly and reckless path.
Before you said that, hold on, before you said that, Kofi Bentil has sent this message. It is a good thing that Parliament is a check on the executive. Let us encourage government to learn to negotiate and work with other parties in Parliament. We must not be seen to suggest that Parliament must be on the side of the executive before government can function. Governments function best in the interest of the nation when there are effective checks and balances. Governments are prone to corruption when there are no checks. Let's work for a strong parliament capable of checking the executive. Now to that point you were going
Brilliant submission. Look, the way Ghanaians have started voting in this very discerning manner, sophisticated manner, it is very possible that in the near future, you have a president who wins the presidency convincingly, but the parliamentary outcome will be totally different, where he would even have a minority, not hung, a minority in parliament with a minority-led speaker and leadership. How are we going to... We need to start, thinking about these things.
Yeah, so you say it is discriminatory to target Adjo Asafo. Why?
Yes, so before I go there, let me quickly place on record.
Very limited time though.
Place on record that the setback that our motion suffered under the Honorable Joe Osewusu, First Deputy Speaker, is only a setback. We will be refiling a motion on the COVID-19 expenditure. And we expect the Right Honorable Speaker, as he has given an indication, because he said in his ruling that we should know what to do, to set right the wrong. Then I want to quickly deal with this matter of absenteeism. The decision you refer to by the appeal court, the Professor Kweku Azan case, the 2005 case,
right?
There's a very interesting, aspect of the judgment, where the judgment by the very
2008 decision.
Yes, yes. Sorry,
at the time, things have already gone under the water.
It says, I have already found that the maximum period the Speaker could allow a member of Parliament to absent himself from Parliament is 15 days. It is unacceptable for Parliament to grant a leave of absence longer than envisaged under Article 97(1)(c) of the Constitution and the Standing Orders of Parliament. I find that it was unlawful for Parliament to grant the Honourable Member of Parliament indefinite leave of absence.
That's right.
So, by this judgment, the appeal court is saying that once you cross 15 days, there can be no salvation for you.
That's right.
You are out of Parliament. Your seat must be declared vacant. That brings me to the revelation I made earlier this week, that the focus has been on the Honourable Adjusafo and is discriminatory. When you go through these votes and proceedings, copies of which I've brought here, from Tuesday 26 October 2021 to the Thursday 25th November 2021, you find out that two other MPP MPs, the Honourable Kennedy Ejepon and the Honourable Henry Korte, Greater Accra Region Minister, missed 18 sittings, not 15, 18 sittings, both of them consecutively. 18. So we should be talking about the possibility of 3 by-elections, not 1. Yesterday, I read that the Honourable Kennedy Ejepon has confirmed this and says that his medical reports are intact. So he's waiting to prove to the Privileges Committee that he had justifiable grounds. He has his medical reports. That's not my reading of the Constitution. And when I read the Professor Kweku Azan judgment, that's not the understanding I'm getting. Once you have crossed 15 days, there's no salvation for you. And in any case, the Constitution provides that you seek permission. Why are they not seeking permission? Why are we treating Parliament with such contempt? And at the end of the day, we attract opprobrium, the entire parliamentary class. People then say that, look, we vote for these guys, they don't attend the House, they are always absent. We should earn our keep, and we should stop subjecting ourselves to such ridicule. I am also worried that, you see, as an institution, we don't seem to have internal, inherent mechanisms to check this. If I hadn't gone through the votes and proceedings, if it had not been a matter of e-levy, because we can't get the Honourable Adjusafo to come and help us pass e-levy, these matters would not have come up and receive the attention that is receiving. So, April, as an institution, we should carry out reforms and deal with this.
In April 2018, I reviewed Odikro's work. Odikro works in Parliament. It's a body, an NGO that works in Parliament, and details, checks on the MPs and the attendance in the House. And I noted from what they had done, and we know that we have actually had our Parliament not being able to form a quorum and postponing a debate of the budget in 2016, simply because we can't have 92, only 92 of the 275 members present in that Parliament House. These are people, we give them all sorts of perks. Now, between January 2013 and July 2014, the average MP missed 1 in every 4 sittings of the House. This increased by 58% by 2015. On June 12, 2015, only 83 MPs were in the House. Over 22% were absent for many sittings without permission. In 2017, 27 MP ministers and 21 MP deputy ministers absented themselves more than 15 times during some 80 sittings. This is the system you have. And guess what? They never trigger this provision of the standing orders and to get those MPs booted out. We'll be right back. We're taking a break.
This time we will.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Let's quickly speak to Professor Solomon Nunu, who is UTAC National President and Dean, Office of Research, Innovation and Consultancy, UMAT, TAQUA. We're speaking to him very briefly to get a sense of the developments within UTAC. As we know,
can I respond to Ablakwa on what he has said?
Please hold on, Gary, hold on for me. Now, yes, Professor Nunu, thank you for your time on Newsfile.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. We have been monitoring yesterday, and it does appear that the decision that the National Executive Council took to suspend the strike is not carrying favor with your members across the country. So far, I think I've counted almost about 8 of your branches or 7 that have voted to reject the suspension. And then I think about 2 so far that have voted, or 1 that have voted to say that they agree with the suspension. What's the way forward? Are you really getting back in the classroom?
Yes, per our UTAC constitution, mainly once a strike action is suspended, we have to go back to the classroom and then go back to teaching. So whether a campus has voted against the suspension or for the suspension, all of us will go back to the classroom and go back to lecture. At the end of the referendum, we'll collect the results. After the collation, the next step is that if majority of the members do say that we need to continue with the strike action, then an extraordinary meeting of the National Executive Committee will have to be constituted to determine the date for the next strike action. So that is the case. And something I must state that the suspension became necessary for us to do that so that we can go back to the table and negotiate. So if you'll notice, we gave ourselves up to next week Friday, which is still going to be within the period of 10 working days. We have to get this whole processes done. So the whole idea for us was to make sure we get the chance to go and negotiate. So if the negotiations go as planned, then there wouldn't be the need. But otherwise, then in that case, members would have already armed the National Executive Committee to continue with the strike action.
Yeah, so in this referendum that is going on in your branches, how many? 15 branches across the country? Or?
That's accurate, 15 branches.
Yes, and from the results we had by the evening of yesterday, University of Education, Winneba, voted to reject. University of Ghana voted to reject. Huge numbers voted to reject. University of Health and Allied Sciences, they are the only university I see from the list I have that voted to say you should stay. KNUST and the rest of them. Where do you stand this morning? How many have voted to confirm the suspension and how many reject the suspension of the strike?
So as at yesterday, we had 5 campuses voting to confirm, to reject the suspension, whereas 2 campuses had, 5 campuses have rejected the suspension, whereas 2 campuses have confirmed the suspension as at yesterday.
Okay.
This weekend, today and tomorrow, there wouldn't be any votes, but the rest of the campuses, I think about 8 of them, will have their voting done on Monday.
And what will be majority?
The majority, it's a simple majority, so we are looking at 8 campuses, and then we'll have to then decide on the dates for the next strike action.
Once you have 3 more campuses voting, rejecting the suspension, the strike continues.
That is accurate. But in that case, the National Executive Committee needs to have an extraordinary meeting to decide on the next date for the strike action to be continued.
And as it looks now, it definitely doesn't look good that the majority, of course, so far the majority, 7, 5 say we don't agree that we should go back to the classroom. Are you getting any overtures? Are you getting any, calls to get to avoid extending this strike, because the impact is bad?
Yes, it's exactly so. But for us, the most important thing in all of this is that if the conditions of service of the university teacher is improved upon, then there wouldn't be any need for us to be on strike. So definitely, once everything is done and then we get to the table, we had our first engagement on Thursday. So after the engagement, we are going to meet again next week, Wednesday. So next week, Wednesday, that is planned to be an in-house campaign, so that Wednesday, Thursday, and possibly Friday, we have a continuous engagement in order to iron out whatever differences there are and to finalize things. If definitely whatever is offered to the university teacher is exactly what we are looking for, or is within the limits of what we are looking for, then there wouldn't be the need for us to be on strike. So it's also because
but I thought the court had ruled that you have been injuncted from continuing the strike.
That is accurate, but that doesn't stop us from starting a new strike if there's a need to.
Oh. Thank you very much. But from what we know, it's really bad. Parents and guardians are taking quite a hit. People have spent money. Their children have gone to school. Their wards have been in school, and there have not been any lessons, any teaching going on. Some of them have actually packed home. You know, this is not right. Something has to happen. Professor Solomon Nunu, UTAC National President and Dean, Office of Research, Innovation and Consultancy, UMAT Takwa. Thank you very much. Now, just 1 minute each. Gary first. Let's hear from you, Gary.
Samson, let me use this opportunity to humbly appeal to UTAC to please go back to the classroom and to also engage government in its attempt for better conditions of service. I can feel the feeling of the students. If you were in school and school was on recess or on strike in this nature, our time at Mobile was struggle and all that. I know what we went through in the school. We are begging them, please. If we can humbly go back to the classroom once you engage government to get your pound of flesh, I think that would be
okay. And from the way I read their constitution, it may not even come down to majority of campuses, but majority of members, because that's what their constitution says. Once majority of members vote against, so as we stand, if they collate, they tally the actual votes, and it is the majority so far, then the vote is bad. Yes.
So I'm saying the general mood of the country is that we are begging them, appealing to them to go back to the classroom once they engage government to ensure that whatever they think.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. In less than a minute. Sorry. Less than a minute. Yeah, last one to you. Less than a minute.
Yes. I mean, clearly things do not look good. It is obvious that the strike is not over at all. If you look at the trend, many of the lecturers, and these are intelligentsia, they are not convinced that the strike should end. I can only appeal to government to sit with them and meet them, and meet their demands, because
it took some eminent citizens to get them to take that decision. All right. So I'm sorry, but we have run out of time.
And I hope the president himself.
We have run out of time. I'm very sorry. Thank you so very much. My guests on the show have been Professor Kwejo Appiagyei Etua, School of Law, University of Ghana, Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, Gary Nimako Mafo, Member, Legal Constitutional Committee of the New Patriotic Party, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, the MP, North Town, and Ranking Member, Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, Dr. Theo Champong, Political Risk Analyst and Economist. We also heard from Professor Samuel Nunu, Solomon Nunu, UTAC National President and Dean, Office of Research, Innovation and Consultancy, University of Mines, Takwa. I'm Samson Ladia Yenini. God willing, next week we come your way with another edition of Newsfile.